When we measure vulnerability by how much someone exposes about their body, we reinforce the idea that our value is still tied to how we look. Even when the conversation claims to be about self-love, self-acceptance, neutrality. And if you're healing from emotional overeating and you're really trying to create a healthy attachment with food and your body, consuming this type of content can tip you back into obsession really quickly, right? Obsession and compulsion really quickly, because it tells your nervous system, you're not safe until you fix this, right? It tells your nervous system, like, now you're like your next level of satisfaction is if you change how you are and you do this. So what do we do with this? Right now that we've named all this stuff, we've talked about this, what do we do with this? How do we engage in a world that profits from our insecurities without getting completely swallowed by it? And so here's what I want you to remember. You don't have to judge these women. You don't have to villainize these women, right, at all. Everybody has a right to behave and take action with themselves as they please. So we're not speaking negatively about any of this stuff, but you, the women and men that are listening to this episode today, who have different motivations and have different struggles, as you consume this content, I just want you to start to come at it with a bit more of a reflective lens, a curious lens, and realize that you have the choice not to internalize these choices and actions as aspirational. And the way that you do this is, when you're consuming this content, you take a pause and ask yourself, does this piece of media make me feel more at home in my body or more like I have to fix it? Right? Ask yourself, am I scrolling for connection and ending up in feeling like I'm comparing myself and ending up in comparison and feeling unworthy, or am I doing that? And then the last question is, whose voice gets louder in my head when I see this, when I read this? Right? Is it the world or is it my own voice? And so when the answer feels heavy, right? When the answer feels like you're more disconnected, you feel more like your head starts spinning, like you have to fix yourself, when you feel just like the voices that are other than yours get loud, that's your cue to come back to you, right? That's your cue to come back to your needs, your values, your definition of beauty and worth. And that's the work, right? Continuing to refine your internal culture, right? Knowing yourself more. What are your needs? What are your values? And maybe part of your values is enhancing your body with some of this stuff. And like I said, it's not even about that. It's about do you have inner authority with your inner world when you are consuming this content? And are you coming from a place of agency? Right? So you want to keep coming back to your needs, your values, your definition of beauty and worth. Right? For some of you, you might say, I do feel at home in my body, right? I do feel inspired, and that's great. But if you don't, be honest about that. Okay? Because real healing isn't about replicating someone else's blueprint. right? It really is about reclaiming the right to be sovereign in your own skin. And so the more that you build trust with your body through emotional regulation, through consistent self-care that's, about understanding your needs, your values, taking action that respects yourself, whether that's with other people, with food, right? When you do that, the less power these narratives will hold, and you might be able to really just consume it as something that's an interesting thing, right? For her, right? An interesting thing for that woman. And you don't have to internalize it or personalize it about you. Okay, so here's the key takeaway that I want you to hold on to for today, right? Just because someone shares the detail about something doesn't mean it's the deeper nuance. Okay, being transparent about something is not the same as being free. It's not the same as being like completely, it's not the same. Okay, freedom comes when you take your power back, right? Freedom comes when you don't outsource your opinions about yourself, when you don't outsource your inner feeling of confidence, when you start rooting in something that's completely unique to you, that's unshakable about you. And that's your inner compass. And so you have to build that inner compass, because that's when you become free, right? And then everything else is kind of like an add-on, but it doesn't impact your core.